For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday practice of Stanford week. Now, it was a defensive day, so there was a lot of talking to the defensive coaches and players. One of the main topics was USC's edge contain, the scramble yards that Fresno State's quarterback Jorge Reyna had on USC. Now, it was an interesting take from USC's coaches and players. It seemed kind of like what Clay Helton told us on Saturday and Sunday in his press conferences, that it wasn't, they kind of discounted the scramble yards that Reyna got, and were mainly pleased with what they did on the interior, their gap control, and shutting down Fresno State's running back.
Yeah, I think discounted is a good word. It was like, you know, if we set out to stop their primary running back, and we really, from the C gap to the C gap, and we really shut that down, and we have our defensive ends beat their people on the sack, and they're in the backfield, everything else after that doesn't count. It was like, yeah, and we had a rendition of all the yards that were made in maybe more non-traditional rushing yards, not by their primary running back. Although, if your quarterback's gaining all the yards, he probably becomes the primary running back. But we got up to a minimum of 175 to as many as 220 some yards of the 462 that Fresno got, that were like, those don't exactly count. Those are kind of flukes, or whatever. I think we could explain that, because that's probably not what's going to happen with Stanford this week, and it's probably not going to happen maybe to the same extent with Brigham Young. So they feel like, okay, we really worked hard on the run fits and on the gap content, all of that thing, with the defensive line. I thought Coach K, Chad K, had a very interesting comment about what else happened in the game. He said, I'm not responsible for the edge. That's what happens on the edge. That's not me. So I think we're pretty sure where the issue was, as if we weren't already. When your own D-line coach said, I'm not responsible for what happens on the edge, because that's where the trouble was.
Yeah. So what do you take away from that, from their reasoning? Is that cause for concern if USC ever does come across a mobile quarterback again in this season, which could happen? Like, what do you take away from their, like I said, discounting, hey, we did what we set out to do, what he did when he scrambled, we weren't necessarily totally prepared for that, but we came out with the win. So is it really that much of a cause for concern? Because that seems to be the mindset, but is that concerning for USC fans?
I think a lot of places you would have people who would say, we're really going to work on some kinds of open field tackling, or we're really going to work with the defensive ends on the rush. We don't want them in there where we say, hey, they could add 8 or 9 sacks and they get 3. So we're going to work on breaking down and contain, keeping your eyes open. I mean, we had a couple of coaches that talked about, you got to keep your eyes open. You can't have blinders on. You can't run by guys, and you got to finish. And so I told that to Drake Jackson. I said, your coaches say you can't play with the blinders on, and you got to finish. So when you hear that, what do you think? And he says, I got to finish. I said, okay, you got to finish. You're right. How do you do that? You just got to do it. And that's the issue. And not to say that it's easy to work on tackling quarterbacks in practice. Yeah. I mean, you're not allowed to. Nobody, even, I know Coach Chad said, well, there are some places I coached at that they would tackle the quarterback. I said, not here, I'll bet. He's not here, for sure. And you probably shouldn't have done it wherever else he was talking about. Yeah. But it is kind of an issue. And it's sort of a tradition with Clancy's defense, is that they haven't tackled the quarterback well, and that they did every possible thing you could do with the quarterback. But to be honest, those yards do count. He kept almost every major drive of Fresno State alive by his scrambles.
Yeah.
And then that gave him a chance to hit a couple of those deep throws that he hurt USC with. So I just don't think they think it's really going to be as much of a factor this week, because as much as USC doesn't want to look, and play off the other team, that's just not what Stanford does. They've got 2 drop-back quarterbacks, one of them who may not even clear concussion protocol, KJ Costello. And so that's not how Stanford's going to hit you. If you do a really good job on the gap control and run fits and all of that, and you're very sound up front, you've got a good chance against Stanford. So, but looking forward, I can see why they're not as concerned. Looking backwards, I can see why people would be concerned.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Stanford, like you just mentioned, Clancy Pendergast was asked about, hey, how do you prepare for which quarterback you're going to get? It might be KJ, it might not be. And essentially what you said, he said, you know with Stanford what you're getting. He said with Fresno State, we didn't exactly know, but we definitely know coming into Stanford. And to Clancy's credit, he's had Stanford's number a couple of times, many times, especially in the 2017 Pac-12 championship run. But how does USC prepare when they don't necessarily know what they're geting, but they do in a certain sense?
I think this is one of those games where exactly what they've said is it's about us, and it's about doing what we do well, and just not having the breakdowns, not having mistakes. Doing the kind of contained stuff. I mean, let's face it, last year they end up, that's a loss, but they gave them 17 points and they really gave them a touchdown. So they played enough defense last year on the road to win that game. So I think they're probably feeling like, we may not have been as ready for Fresno. We thought we could beat, Fresno no matter how that game went. But we got to be ready for Stanford. So it almost looks like we talked about it. We're kidding about it a little bit yesterday on offense and special teams, and used the word sandbagging Stanford. You could almost say it might have looked a little bit like that too on defense. That they didn't really show you a lot of stuff that they do or they can do, and they probably will do against Stanford. But you're looking at 2 different kinds of attacks, and again, they didn't know what they were going to see with Fresno. Everybody knows what you're going to see with Stanford.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to USC's defensive backs, that was something that everyone knew might be a concern come game time. Now, Greg Burns, you got to talk to him today. How did he take away their performance and what they can work on going forward?
Not bad. I thought, it's first game. You got a young team. You've got high standards and hopes for them. And he said you'd like to not give up any deep balls. That would be your goal. He said we gave up 3, but not a bad effort. He wouldn't downgrade them. And he had some good things to say about each of the kids, and mentioned about like maybe figuring out how to get Chase Williams into the game more as nickel safety, whatever. But he didn't seem terribly disappointed at all with the play of the secondary, and probably rightly so.
Yeah. Clancy Pendergast was asked, that's a hard one, what he learned from Drake Jackson in his freshman debut. And the first thing that Clancy Pendergast said was, I learned that I'm very glad that he's a Trojan, because he was impressed with his debut. Like you said, Dan, you got to talk to Jackson about his first performance. What do you have to say?
Well, I asked him, I said, Clancy said this week he'd like you to take the blinders off. So, and what do you, and Drake is such a good guy. He said, I'm going to take the blinders off. He just, wherever you go with him, he did say, I learned that I can beat people off the ball. They can't always block me. And he said that was a good thing to learn, that I can make. So Clancy, I thought, made a good point. He said what we looked like we were trying to do was to beat people at the line of scrimmage and get ourselves, get them by the guy that was trying to block me. He said what we've got to do now is, that you've got an advantage, but you've got to be thinking about making the play, not just beating the guy. I mean, how many times did you see both defensive ends beat their guy and ran by the quarterback, or the quarterback ran by them? So I think, as we said before, the emphasis with Drake and with Christian is finish plays. You can look good, you can look, running free, you're all by yourself and scaring the quarterback to death. Doesn't do you any good if you don't put him on the ground. And I think that's the question, as to how do you get that done in practice. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. When it comes to Pali'ie Naioteote, Clancy Pendergast said that he was overzealous in his pursuit, once again had the blinders on. EA himself said that it was a mediocre performance on Saturday. Dan, what did you see from EA? I guess no one was really expecting that type of performance from him. What can he do going forward to kind of shore up those issues?
I think he's just got to get comfortable out there and under control and feel like I belong out here. I've got plenty enough athleticism, power, strength. I can, take people down wherever I run into him, and just be comfortable in who he is and not try too hard. I mean, there were times he's just he's flying and it's like the ball, went by you over here or whatever, and you went by the ball carrier. And so under control and confident and comfortable, and that's one of those things that you just have to play through. You have to get enough time on the field. That's one of those reasons that some of us were not happy that we didn't see Pali'ie on the field more last year.
Yeah.
That's where you develop that ability, so you're not still feeling like you're a freshman.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, he's got so much ability, it's just ridiculous. But that's got to, and maybe the focus of a Stanford, where you really do have a sense of they're just going to try to come at you, do what they do, and hopefully they can do it better than you can do to stop it. And one would hope that's exactly the challenge that Pali'ie needs this week.
Yeah. As far as injuries go, Andrew Voorhees actually returned to practice. He did warm-ups, and we saw him do some stuff, but we can't confirm if he played the whole practice. We know with Devin Williams that was something that we weren't sure about, but he did. Devin was dressed out today. As far as the injured guys, Max Williams, Jake Lichtenstein, Elijah Winston, and Abdul Malik McLean are still out. Yeah. Curious about Jake Lichtenstein just because Clay had given him a timeline, and he's still out and past that timeline, so wondering how he's progressing there. But no other real injury updates besides that. But Dan, I'm going to ask for your prediction here. What are you expecting to go down on Saturday? I know USC is, the last time I checked, is favored in this game, but what are you expecting come Saturday?
I mean, you would probably right now, you've got the potential for two backup quarterbacks who haven't played much at all. You've got two teams that have, on paper, look like they could be pretty solid defensively. One would think last year's game, total of 20 points was scored. I don't know, will there be more? And yet USC has that potential. I think no matter who the quarterback is, you still have an awful lot of guys who can go out and catch the ball. Yeah. If they run, I don't think we really saw the air raid the way USC's practiced it. We saw it first couple of series. We didn't see it a lot more. If they come out and they just don't care, we've got a true freshman quarterback, first start ever as a college player. It's against Stanford, and you just come out and you just play and you just go after him and you just trust your talent, his talent. Maybe USC has the ability, to get on the board fairly quickly. What they haven't been able to do in the last 2 years is once they get on the board, once they get those double-digit leads, to make it pay off, and they don't have that ability yet. And this would be a great game to get that kind of a lead and then kind of dare Stanford to try to do some things and take some chances to get back in the game. That would be the ideal scenario if you're a USC person, but we'll see. It's going to be an interesting challenge for Keaton Slovis.
Yeah. Now, is it even worth trying to predict a score prediction given how weird last year's game was and whatnot?
Yeah, I think they've got a chance to do. USC's got a chance. I'm only usually going to predict USC from USC's point of view. I think USC's got a chance to put up some points. It wouldn't shock me. Now, we watched, Northwestern had all kinds of trouble scoring on Stanford last week. It looked like a lot of that was Northwestern mistakes, but Stanford's pretty sound. I don't know if they're athletic enough. USC didn't take as much advantage of their athleticism or their athletic advantages over Fresno as they probably should have. So how does that all play out? I think USC ought to win the game. Is it one of those games where you win 20 to 20-14 or 20-10 or something like that, where both teams really have to struggle. And games like that often are who drops the ball, who kicks the ball, who does whatever, and those you can't even begin to predict. So USC was, I don't know if anybody saw this, USC is the least penalized team in the Pac-12. I mean, people were, you don't count the 100 and some yards and the touchdown that got called back, but USC with 4 penalties for 35 yards is #1 in the Pac-12. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before, where USC led the Pac-12 in that category. So that's a good thing. Playing at home is a good thing. Yeah. But I think it would be more sensible to pick a relatively modest scoring game than lighting it up. But I think if there's a potential to light it up, USC might have that. I mean, they've gotten those, quote, first game jitters out of their system, so we shall see. Yep.
We shall see indeed. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for Wednesday's practice of Stanford Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.